There we go. So anyway, once again, thank you very much. So housekeeping, if I could ask you while the speakers are speaking, if you can keep your microphones on mute, and that way we won't all disturb one another. We can all hear what's going on. And again, if I can ask you if you have any questions whilst the speakers are speaking, could I just ask you to post those in the chat, and I'll try and collect them at the end, and we'll deal with questions at the end. And then once Tom and Helen have finished doing whatever they want to do, we'll then have a more open sort of question answer and discussion session if you've got anything to do with that. And one final thing is just to say that the presentation from tonight will be made available on our website. So again, if you want to go back and check on anything that's up in the website, and Helen has usefully added a list of contact details on the end of that. So if there's anybody you want to contact as a result of what you see this evening, then those details will be there. And as I said, you can collect those from our website. So this evening we're talking about planting for Norfolk's future, and in particular, I think looking at the sort of larger plantings. Our two speakers tonight are Tom Russell-Grant, who is an arboricultural and woodland officer. I tend to think of him as a tree man because it takes up less room in my head. And we're joined by Helen Terry, who's a project officer on the Greenways project. The main speaker tonight will be Tom, who will be having a presentation. So I will now pass you over to Tom.
So hello, it's good to see so many of you here tonight, despite the football being on. So first up, can you see my slide? If you can give me a thumbs up. Yeah, excellent. So yeah, I'll be talking you through some of Norfolk's planting this evening, and I'm going to focus on some of the information that isn't really readily accessible in the out there on the internet. There's so much good planting guidance out there. And I want to touch on some of the planned work and the future work that the Norfolk County Council's getting up to. So not everything that I speak to about this evening is current. It's some stuff that we're looking towards the future with. And Helen's here. Helen is a great support to our team, and she's got a bit of an oversight about all of the sort of project areas. So if I get unstuck on anything that's particularly not tree related, hopefully Helen will be able to answer those questions at the end. So, all right, first technical hitch. There we go. Right. So this is roughly what I'm going to talk about. Is why do we need trees? Why are we bothering with this planting? A quick background into the Million Trees for Norfolk project and some of the strategies that underpin it. And then I'd like to focus a bit more in depth on our approach to evidence, to mapping, and particular sort of emphasis on connectivity and how we can help achieve that. An update on what's happening this coming planting season. And the reason that we're timetabled the sort of talk this evening, despite the football, is that there is another event going on at the minute, and that's National Tree Week. So that's a really good celebration of all things tree, and it sort of kickstarts the planting season here. So there's some good links to how to get involved with that, and then I'll give you a bit of information about how you can get involved, some of the schemes that we're running and some of the schemes that other partners are running to sort of really try and help people get out there and plant trees. So who am I? Well, yeah, my name's Tom Russell-Grant, and as Pete quite rightly said, I am an arboriculturalist, which even I struggle saying. So yeah, I'm a tree and woodland person. I give advice on trees to the county council, and I work within, as you can imagine, quite a few departments that have all nested together. So I do work with our landscape team and with ecologists in that sort of big umbrella that is the County Council's Environment Service. And within that, I get involved in quite a few projects. There's Greenways to Green Spaces, which is what the Million Trees is included with. So that's got a lot of focus around, obviously, nature and particularly people. ash dieback, managing ash diebacks, you know, a significant challenge in the county. I also help advise our planners with planning applications, give advice to county farms, to highways, and really the bread and butter of my working day used to be just giving health and safety advice on trees. You know, is this tree likely to fall over? That kind of thing. But these days I've got quite a diverse range of work, and it's all now sort of forming under the umbrella of Natural Norfolk, which is one of the ways that we're going to deliver nature recovery in Norfolk, and hopefully pull together all the strands of our environment policy. So that's me. But what about trees? Why do we need trees? Well, we've lost trees over the years. So going back a long way in time, you know, we've lost over a third of the trees that used to be here since the Ice Age, and that's still happening. So deforestation is still occurring at alarming rates in some of the key forests of the world, and that's really causing a big problem, obviously, with climate change. More locally, I'm looking at the UK's population of trees. It has been, you know, declining in the sort of recent sort of history. So going back to the Doomsday Book, it's a really good source of evidence. 1086, we had about 15% tree cover then. And then it slumped in World War I to 5%. There was so much of that tree woodland resource was needed for the war efforts. And the government realised that we really needed to be more self-sufficient in our woodland stock, and less reliant on imports, and we needed some oversight on that. So that was when the Forestry Commission was set up. And we've sort of bounced back a bit from then. We're now up to 13%. But that's, you know, that's nothing compared to the European average, which is nearly 40%. So we've definitely got room to grow in terms of our canopy cover in the UK. It's a little bit unfair to compare ourselves to other parts of Europe, because we do have a different, you know, sort of demographic. We're quite a populated island, but there's definitely room to improve that tree cover, and that can help us reach that net zero target by 2050. But to do that, we have got to plant quite a lot more trees. So every year to up that to the government's target of 17% woodland cover by 2050, we've got to plant an extra 30,000 hectares nationally every year, and we're nowhere near that at the minute. So as well as sort of hitting government targets, you know, what else do the trees do for us? Why are they important? Well, they deliver so many things for us. You know, clean air. They really help stabilize and improve soil. Biodiversity is obviously a cornerstone of a lot of ecosystems. There's loads and loads of different benefits. One thing that's focused on at the minute quite strongly is carbon. And it's just interesting to take a step back and look at where trees contribute with carbon capture and storage. So one of the most interesting things, you know, I find is that the scientists tell us, and I really believe them, that the carbon stored in trees it's not all in the trunks and the branchwoods, which is where I'd have thought it would be, but that's under a fifth of the carbon soak. There's a little bit in deadwood that's on the sort of woodland floor. There's a reasonable amount in the roots, but most is actually in the soil and in the sort of surface leaf litter. So that's a really important thing to sort of realize, is that there's far more going on with trees in general than the stuff that you can see above the ground. The soil is really the cornerstone of a woodland, and a lot of the wildlife is completely dependent on that. So yeah, we must never overlook that. So Norfolk County Council's got a pledge to plant 1 million trees over 5 years, and that is to meet a number of those sort of positive reasons for trees contributing to our life in Norfolk. So climate change is a big one. Planting trees to capture carbon isn't really the best way to solve the carbon issue. We really need to reduce carbon emissions to start with, and trees can help top up that sort of route to net zero. But trees provide so many other benefits as well, with wildlife and green space, making people feel well. And we're gradually marching along the road to that target. We're picking up more and more project partners, getting more and more funding, but it has been quite a slow burn to start with. But it's starting to accelerate now, which is really good. So underpinning the tree planting in Norfolk is the need to really plant the right tree in the right place for the right reason, so that the trees are delivering the very best that they can in terms of green infrastructure and ecosystem services. And one of the cornerstones to that expansion is really to look after what we've got to start with. It's so much better to expand a good ecosystem than try to develop one from scratch. And we really want to connect woodlands together because they just work so much better that way, and really celebrate woodlands, develop more of a woodland culture so that people are more aware of trees and their benefits. And a really key part is, as well as trying to slow down the pace of climate change, we want to create a treescape that's resilient to our changed climates. And with that will come new pests and diseases. We've been suffering a massive influx in recent decades. There's Dutch elm disease, there's now ash dieback, there's all sorts of issues with oak trees. So that's our 3 most populous native tree species, all under massive threats. And that's just in since the 70s. There are so many more diseases that are waiting in the wings to come across into the UK, and we really don't want to exacerbate any disease issues by bringing them in with tree planting stock and the soil that comes with that. So we are using robust biosecurity measures to try and avoid that. And working with people. Again, it's quite a slow process to build up those relationships with other organisations, but that's starting to happen. And we really want to use the resources that we've got at the County Council, our own land, to really demonstrate how tree planting can work, and find out what best practice looks like in Norfolk, so that we can replicate that with other landowners. And all of this is under the umbrella of our environment policy. So as well as establishing trees, we really want to reduce the amount of plastics that we use in that process, avoid peats, composts, and pesticides where we can. So it's not always possible to go 100%, plastic, peat or pesticide free, but we really, want to reduce that as much as possible. So this 1 million trees isn't just a numbers game. There's far more to it. The trees are delivering more than just sort of racking up numbers to a target. And I just want to focus a little bit on connectivity and how we can develop that as a model. So David Attenborough is brilliant, and he sums it up pretty well, that everything works better when it's connected, and that's particularly true of woodlands. And they don't have to be connected by large, strips of woodland. Hedgerows do a fantastic job with that as well. And we really need to have some knowledge of where these woodlands are, what existing networks there are, in order to be able to find the gaps, the important gaps to target, to sort of plug. So some of this, what I'll show you now, is it's not been fully worked up, but the principles are brilliant, I think, and I really hope that in the near future we'll develop that into working models that are really practical and helpful for people. So it all revolves around knowing where trees are at the minute, and to do that we have used GIS systems, and we've had to find a good source of information for where trees and hedges are. Now there are commercial services that provide that, but they're really expensive and they come with licenses, and they might withdraw that license at any time. And we just couldn't, we didn't want that restriction. We've managed to find a source of license-free data, and it's come from LiDAR surveys where planes have flown across Norfolk in a sort of zigzag pattern, gathering information. And the information that they've gathered with these flights is the height of objects in a sort of a basic way, and using different wavelengths of light, the LiDAR systems can look at different characteristics in the landscape. So the top left-hand picture there is sort of what you might think of as the raw data. So that's just a picture of County Hall, but there's actually much more data in there in terms of heights, etc. And then to turn that into a map of where trees are, all of the things that aren't trees, the things that are buildings and roads, etc., are taken away from that picture, and what's left is by and large the trees. So that's what's on the bottom left there, but we've got a bit more information than just knowing that there is trees or hedges there. We can look at the heights of them as well, so they're split up into different colors. So going from the cool greens at 2 to 5 meters high, all the way up to the sort of the hotter red color, which is trees over 20 meters. So it's not 100% accurate, but it is a really, really good starting point for looking at trees at any scale, really. And this is it's the Norfolk Tree and Hedges map, and it's publicly available. You can have a look at it online at any time. And on the right there's a sort of zoomed out picture of Norfolk, so you can really start to look at the wider picture there. You've got Thetford Forest down in the bottom around Thetford. Up in the top you can see the sort of woodland round Holcombe. So it's quite interesting looking at that wider view. But it gets really interesting, I think, at a more local level. And as well as having the current tree sort of map from that LiDAR, on the Tree and Hedges map, we've also got historic maps. So I don't want to go too much into that, but there is the 1988 aerial photograph series, the 1940s one from the war. There's the first edition Ordnance Survey map, which is what I'd like to focus on, but also the tithe and enclosure maps where they exist. So you can start to see the change in the landscape over time, which might be interesting, but I think with the first edition map, it's actually really useful. So with the first edition map, the cartographers plotted all of the trees that they thought were significant in the time. And at the top left-hand slide there, you can see just an area of rural Norfolk, and all the darker blobs there are individual trees that the cartographer mapped. You can overlay the current tree and hedge map, and you can see where there's quite a significant number of those hedgerow trees that aren't there anymore. So that's where the fields have expanded, or maybe the sort of the boundary lines have just been lapsed and trees haven't been replanted. So it's a bit depressing to see where those trees have disappeared from the landscape. But it would be nice to think we can use that as a tool in the future to really target where tree planting is going to provide the most benefits. And the main slide there shows some blue dots, and that's where our GIS team has started to train the computer to digitize those first edition maps, so that we can actually look to see where the current tree stock is and compare that to where the trees used to be. And using that, we can really start to target areas where we can support those remnants from the first edition map, and areas where, you know, a lot of those trees have completely vanished from the landscape. So depending on what our aims are, we can start to sort of be a bit more strategic about targeting tree planting. So I mean, why do these old trees matter? Which is is a good thing to think about. You know, is this tree 160 years old? You know, was it around at least 20 years old in 1880? Well, this one probably was. It's really hard to date old trees. So is it ancient or veteran? You know, well, it's starting to get that way. Really, the trees grow for roughly a third of their lives, and then they sort of mature for a third, and then the final third is often in decline. And it's when trees have reached that full maturity and going into decline that we really get the most interesting biodiversity in them. And it's partly because they've been there for such a long time that there's enough time for all of that wildlife to find a home there, but also because the trees start developing these really sort of beneficial characteristics of deadwood and splits and rock pockets and little pools of water that are really, really great for wildlife. And that's just the stuff we can see above the ground. There's an incredible amount going on in the soil with fungi and nematodes and bacteria and a whole load of stuff that I don't really understand, but know is fantastically important, and is quite hard to develop. It just takes time to get those eco sort of systems up and running. So yes, it does matter that that this tree is old and that it's ancient. And interestingly, in this picture, there aren't too many younger trees, and that's important because these ancient trees will decline and disappear over time, and we really need to invest some thought into the next generation of these trees so that wildlife is able to migrate from these great hosts and keep that cycle going. So the more that we can identify the sites of those older trees and help supplement them by encouraging new trees to grow alongside them, the better. So what about connectivity? Well, the slide on the left is just a sort of an overview of the dark green blobs representing woodlands with sort of nodes at the center, and some corridors in the lighter green connecting those woodlands together. So that's sort of what a connected network can look like. The data that we've got, and we've started to use this in real life situations on our county farms, is in the middle. It's a bit of a small picture. There's a blue rectangle, which is one of the registered land holdings. It's just a field. A lot of fields are registered and split up, so we can use that as a kind of a unit. And we can look at around that field, and the computer, it is not infallible, but it can outline where it thinks we've got missing hedges, where there's missing sort of connectivity, if you like, in the hedgerow, with the sort of the dotted line, the sort of light bluey dotted line there. So we can start to rank fields in terms of where they've got hedgerows missing, how many of those hedgerows have got these, likely to have these older trees on them, and start to kind of prioritize where we want to restore those field boundaries, those hedges and hedgerow trees, as well as just restoring where bits are missing, we can have a look at some of the qualities of the hedgerows as well. So the larger picture on the right there just shows the different average heights of the hedges. So you could say that a very low hedge isn't necessarily very diverse, doesn't support that much wildlife, and a really tall hedge or tree line supports more. That's not necessarily always true, but we can also look at variation in hedges. So hedges or connecting features that have got a lot of diversity in terms of their heights. And that might be because there are lots of different species there that grow at different heights, or it might be under different management, but there's lots of diversity in a hedge line that's got different heights to it. So we can start to maybe think about ranking things in quality like that, all as a sort of a desktop study. But what things look like in reality is massively important. We can't just rely on the computer, but this is what I'm talking about on the left-hand side here of a hedge that's good for wildlife. It's really thick at the base. You've got growth all the way down to the floor. There's quite a nice bit of height variation there, lots of different habitats, and crucially, you can see all the blossom on this hedge, and that's largely there because it hasn't been chopped off, because the hedge hasn't been over trimmed in the winter, and all those blossom bearing stems haven't been flailed. So we've got a lovely nectar source there in the spring, for pollinators, and it's also going to bear fruit and nuts in the winter for mammals. So that's an example of a good hedgerow, what we want to encourage. On the right there, we're sort of jumping across to other methods of establishing woodlands, and this is through natural colonization. So that's where you've got an existing woodland, maybe with some of those older trees that I was talking about earlier, that's really, one of the roles of trees is to propagate, to create seeds and for them to be successful in the landscape. So we can use that to our advantage if we identify areas of land which we'd like to convert from their current use into woodland, just by changing our management practices. So it might be not ploughing the field, it might be not keeping livestock on there that browse young trees. Or it might be as simple as not mowing the grass there and just allowing some of these trees to spring up, that the wind has spread the seeds, or animals, squirrels, jays have planted. So alongside natural colonization, there's natural regeneration as well, and this sort of crosses over to some other work that I'm involved with, which is the management of ash dieback. So there's a pretty devastating scene on the left there where we had to fell a fairly significant number of ash trees because they'd reached the point where they were starting to fall apart, and there weren't any significant trees within that compartment, ash trees that were looking viable in the long term. They're in really difficult growing conditions there with a really high prevalence of the disease. And we've decided, which is a relatively rare situation, but to clear fell, leaving any healthy ash trees that we could. That's really important, and also any other non-ash species. And the picture on the right is 3 years later, and you can just see the massive regeneration there. We wouldn't have got anything like that regrowth if we'd had planted trees in the ground. So it's really sort of working with nature. Here's another example of another section on our trails network, where again we've just got such an abundance of natural regeneration there, that's really far outdone anything that we could have done in terms of tree planting. So what are we doing this season, this winter? Well, Plenty is the answer. We're using some of that work on connectivity on our county farms. So we're gapping up hedgerows with hedging, but also trees within them. You can see the picture on the right of the slide there. We're using spiral guards to stop rabbits and small deer nibbling away at the new saplings, but we're using biodegradable guards. And the sort of white carpety type thing, that is a Hessian mulch mat. And the reason for that is to sort of put a lid on any competition from other plants that would sort of try to outcompete our new saplings, and also lock in moisture. So that's, this mulching around new trees is really important. And it's really good to use natural materials. It would have been better, to be honest, if we'd have used wood chip or something like that could have a bit more bulk of natural organic matter to then get recycled back into the soil and really start to create that sort of woodland soil. So that's something we're working with the Tree Council on, and we'll be planting around 55,000 stems across our county farm network. So that's a nice project. We're also looking at larger scale woodland opportunities. So there's a big piece of work on mapping to try and find those areas of land where it's able to support tree sort of cover, new tree cover, and where that's not going to be at the expense of other really important and valuable habitats, such as heathland and wildflower rich grassland. So we're progressing that. We're able to provide a bit more support to some landowners now to try and develop these larger schemes. They can be a bit complicated. There is a huge amount of resource out there in terms of sort of funding, but it takes a bit of effort to unlock that. There's quite a lot of stages to go through. So we're looking to support landowners in going through those application processes. And we've got some sites on our county farms that we're developing at the minute. So we're looking at planting up on just on one site around 26 hectares for mixed purpose woodland, both for amenity for people to enjoy, but also wildlife. And this is another slide just to show some extra work that we're doing on what's sort of termed trees outside of woodlands. And this shows a particular style of planting called Miyawaki planting, which is developed in Japan. The idea is that there are sites that really need trees, and we need that wildlife boost quickly, and we want that landscape value, to come along as soon as possible. So the soils are intensively managed. There's lots of extra organic matter put in. There's lots of mulch put on top, and the planting is at a much higher density than we would normally go for in a woodland planting. And the trees just really thrive. So down at the bottom right circle is the Miyawaki method. And this is on the same fenced off plot. It's exactly the same bit of land, but just, if you were to swivel the camera around to the right, we'd get the picture on the top there, which is our control, which is just planting into the ground as it was, which was just a bit of amenity grassland. The individual trees were planted at, I think, a couple of meter spacings with some mulch put in them. It wasn't a bad effort at planting. Care was taken, and both sides were watered this summer as well. We had such a dry summer, but you can really see the difference there, and that just goes to show what can be achieved with good ground preparation. So it's not a technique that suits everywhere. It is quite expensive, but it's a really, really good way of boosting sort of tree planting and biodiversity and landscape in a real sort of pocket park situation, and looking to see if we can replicate that, what the lessons learned are from that. Alongside that, we've also got other sort of projects looking at agroforestry and also tree nurseries as well, community tree nurseries. So this is something that is not quite hot off the press. It hasn't been published yet, but this will be coming up on our website in the very near future. And this just shows a graphic of where our planting's at the minute. So as I said at the beginning, it is quite a slow burn. You know, we're at the sort of the lower end of the planting scale at the minute on our progress to 1 million trees. But what we've done is we've broken down where that planting's happened into parish-sized chunks. The lighter parishes are ones with smaller tree planting sort of numbers, and the darker where we've got higher numbers. And it's just, you know, interesting to see where the effort's going. So, you know, about half of it is on the county council owned land, and then maybe a quarter or so with our partnership working with other organisations, the Woodland Trust, the Wildlife Trust, etc. And another quarter in communities, which is I guess the slice that a lot of the parish councils can sort of take up. So it is, you know, lots of different planting organisations and partners and communities all working together to achieve what are quite ambitious targets. I think we're the only authority that set ourselves a 5-year target. The next one that I know of is looking at 10 years, and others are even up to 20 years to establish that number of trees. So we are pushing it. So partners that we're working with, there's the Wildlife Trust, who are fantastic. You know, they've been working in this field for years. They're a really good landowner, as well as great at engaging with people. And the thing I particularly like about the Wildlife Trust is that they don't just bang on about trees the whole time. They're looking at the best use of land for wildlife as a whole. So tree planting is in that mix of land uses, which I think is so you know, important. We're working with a project called the Trees Outside of Woodland project. So that's where the Miyawaki and agroforestry and community tree nursery projects fall in. So that's a DEFRA funded piece of work, which has been really successful, looking at ways to encourage more of those smaller scale but really important tree planting projects. And we're also working with district councils and you know, particularly with Broadland District at the moment. So how can you get involved? I'm just conscious of time, actually. I'll push on. So as I said at the beginning, it's National Tree Week at the minute. And that really marks the beginning of the planting season. So it's a way to sort of encourage people to get out there and plant and celebrate trees. There's loads of really good information that the Tree Council puts out. And in particular, the section on plant in the middle there is really good. It really talks you through a whole load of decision making and challenges on planting trees. So that's a really, really, you know, good resource. You can also tell us where you planted. You can start to get your parish on the map. You can start to recognise any planting that you've carried out as you know, helping us on this target to 1 million trees. So that's something that's you know, a really useful thing to do. We do ask a few questions. It's as simple as we can make the form, and so it takes about 5 minutes or so to fill in. So that's a really, you know, positive thing that you can do, is to really get your parish on the map there, and help us with our target. And in Norfolk, this is the thing I was supposed to plug, really, so I should have spent a bit longer on this, but this is our sort of offer, our sort of flagship offer this winter is Jubilee Trees for Norfolk. And we're offering subsidised tree packs. So the county council and our colleagues at DEFRA, working in partnership with them, are subsidising to the sort of around 50% costs of various different tree packs. So you can choose the tree pack that really suits your planting need. So we've got taller trees that are more suited to an urban environment. trees that will fit in really well with a hedgerow, and some wildlife packs as well that are really sort of designed to offer the best benefit to native wildlife, and orchard packs as well. So the really important thing with this is that we've got to close those applications. We've got sort of deadlines with our suppliers, and the most pressing one is for the orchard packs. So if you're thinking of planting an orchard, that is a brilliant community thing to do. You know, you get results pretty quick with orchard planting. But you need to get any applications in by noon this Friday. So please consider that as an option if you're thinking of planting some orchard sort of fruit and nut trees. And the other important date on this is the 4th of January. That's when our whole scheme closes for applications. Details on this are at the end in the contact section. So there's some events going on. The Wildlife Trust is running a couple of good events. So you can find out all about how to plant a woodland, an event up in Norfolk, and you can get your hands dirty with some hedgerow planting down in South Norfolk. And Broadland District Council. So this is geographically ring fenced to the Broadland area, but they're able to offer communities and landowners a grant so that they can achieve their tree planting. So that's a really generous offer, that one. And volunteering, you know, that's such a valuable, you know, thing to do with your time and with your communities. So community tree nurseries, there's lots of options there now with existing ones, including our county council community tree nursery at Gresson Hall Museum, or you could try and set up your own tree nursery, and there's contact details for Emma there who can help you with that. Or, you know, another big push this week with the National Tree Week is to support the Tree Council's tree warden scheme. So, you know, have a look to see if a tree warden's needed in your area, if it's in an active tree warden sort of area, and engage with that. There, thank you for listening. I hope that's been useful. It's always a bit tricky to cram everything in. So as I say, I've tried to sort of touch on some of the topics that you won't necessarily be able to find elsewhere, but all of that information is available on these resources here, which is Helen's kindly put at the end of the slide pack. So I'm afraid that's probably the first half of the footy done now, isn't it? But has anyone, you know, got any questions?
Right, Marion, you've sorry, Marlon, you've got your hand up if you want to ask a question. If you unmute.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's yeah, Marlon. I'm used to that, Marion, being called that. They do look alike. I just want, on a practical level, a couple of thoughts that went in my mind. What are the biggest blocks to mass planting? So that we'll, you know, if we want to know what we can do to help, what are the things that kind of stop us going forward? You know, doing it more.
Yeah.
And also, is there anything to be said about? I keep noticing lots and lots of trees being planted on new development roads and that, and then them all seem to dying, and yeah, there doesn't seem to be any replacement. And it's quite, you know, it's upsetting when you see it, because you know it's part of a carbon neutral strategy or something. But we've had a lot. I know we've had a lot of dry spells of weather, and I'm wondering whether that applies to private development as well, because Persimmon are doing a significant amount of development on the Royal Norwich Golf Course, and yeah, they're planning to plant trees as part of the strategy, because they're cutting down so many established trees that are of significant age. And will the same happen to them if they're not? If the watering isn't done right, will they do? And will there be any obligation to have them replaced? So that's just a couple of things that are going through my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Both really good questions. So yeah, thanks for that, Marlon. So Yeah, you're representing Helston area, is that right? So
That's
yeah,
right.
hence
Helston
your
Golf.
interest in that. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, hence your interest in the golf course. So yes, I think the mass planting to start with, yes, it's something that I didn't really expand on too much. But there are always pressures on land use, and we can use the information that we've got on our GIS system to try and filter out some of those opportunities. So in Norfolk, we've got really high quality agricultural land. So we want to keep that as a resource, as a natural resource. We want to be growing stuff, so that can dissuade some mass planting, to sort of, so we're not planting on the high quality agricultural fields, but on the ones that are slightly less productive, just so that we've got that balance right. And there are also quite a lot of other factors that we take in. I'm clearly struggling to think of what they all are at the minute. But there are some designations that really help us in terms of other habitats. So sites of special scientific interest, they've all got citations. So some of them will be designated because of their heathland habitat, for example. So where we've got those designations, we can sort of rule those out as opportunities for large scale planting. But also we can then feed in positive sort of incentives for mass planting, where we need to create some of those stepping stone woodlands where they can be a sort of a hub to connect other woodlands together.
Is it land supply based? Is
well,
it kind of their biggest?
This is the thing. So we can roughly map out where we think trees would provide the most benefits. So that's one side of it, is where we want the trees. But the other side is, as you say, where do people want to plant them? And if those two overlap, then that's brilliant. They don't always overlap. So if people are sticking their hand up saying, yeah, I want to plant a tree, we will do our best to support that. But there might be all sorts of reasons why that's not possible. And I know you've had a real struggle in Helston with highway services, have really sort of put the brakes on some of those planting opportunities, which would have been brilliant, but there's a restriction there. So yeah, it's really land is valuable. It's people always want to return on it, and that's why we're trying to push encourage people to take up the offers from the Forestry Commission, which are pretty generous. So they pay a lot more than just the cost of the trees. They pay for the planting. They also pay for the aftercare management. And there are some innovative schemes that the Forestry Commission's pushing as well for larger landowners, where they're looking at a lease system, so that the Forestry Commission will sort of lease the land from the landowner in exchange for the Forestry Commission managing it and planting up trees that they're specifically growing to capture carbon, and that can then be sold as a commodity. And that income can then get passed back to the landowner. So you've got a direct economic benefit to landowners. So that's the sort of the aim for some of that larger scale scheming. That's the mechanism that can make that work. And it's doesn't always sit comfortably with ecological sort of aims and objectives. So the trees that you plant to store carbon aren't always the ones that are best at supporting wildlife. So there's that kind of balance to be made there. But yeah, finding willing landowners is key, and landowners that have got land that is good for growing trees on, not just a scrap that's useless for anything else.
Keep looking then.
Keep looking, yeah. And the new development question, yeah, I mean that is a brilliant one, and I think you can really peg that down to soil in a lot of cases. So yes, the aftercare is often lacking in some of those schemes in terms of watering, etc. But the trees have a really, really tough starting life, because a lot of the time planted on soil that's been turned over, it's had all of that life knocked out of it. It's not just a question of soil texture and acidity, etc. It's the other life that's there. You need a lot of fungi in the soil for some of the tree species to really grow well. So I think for some of those developments, it's just a bit of extra time that's needed for the soil to sort of settle down and that soil management to happen. And that's something that needs to improve, and a lot of that is centered around regulation and what the planning authorities can do. So a lot of those developments are ones that the district councils administer, those housing ones. So yeah.
Right, we've got a couple of questions waiting, Tom. We'll go to Jane first.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
I just wondered, I'm coming from Booton, which is quite a widespread and a very small hamlet, really, parish.
Yeah.
But there are a number of us in the parish who've got some spare land that they would like to be more active for wildlife, whether hedges or the odd trees that you talk about, the wildlife trees, for example. These grants, these packages that you've got, are they only available for use within public parish land, or are they available for individuals who want to sort of plant more hedgerows? Are you saying this sort of corridor thing that you talked about? What are the limitations?
So yes, it has been a shift. Years ago, or even a couple of years ago, we had to demonstrate that there was public goods being delivered with public money. There's been an acceptance that tree planting, so long as we can broadly understand that the right trees are being planted in the right place for the right reason, that those trees are delivering public benefit in the ecosystem services that they provide. And they don't have to be on public land, and they don't have to be visible anymore, which were the two fairly oddly worded criteria beforehand. So yes, absolutely. If you're a private landowner, you can apply for our grants. If you are in Booton, you might be in Broadland. Are you Broadland there?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Yeah. So have a look at their grants as well, which are potentially a bit more generous than the county council one. I probably shouldn't. Well, I should. My job is to try and encourage trees to grow in the in their best way.
That's very helpful, because there are quite a few quite a few of us who would like to do it, but kind of actually just looking at your packs make it actually really easy to do it, because we think, oh right, we'll just buy that and that will
well, that's the thing. It's a bit silly having a one size fits all. So we've got a few different packages there, and it's it would be nice to have a bespoke planting package for each site, but that almost overwhelms people with choice. So hopefully some of that decision making in those broad categories is there for you. So yes, have a look at that. Have a look at the Broadland ones. We do carry out a checks once we receive those applications, so it goes through quite a significant filtering system so that we can do our best to make sure that the tree planting isn't going to be causing a problem in the future and is going to be delivering benefits.
Right.
But yeah.
So just final very quick question on that then. Are we under time pressure for you to give approval? Because we might then miss the planting period.
Yeah, so that's yes, we've put ourselves under time pressure for that. So we've got this odd break over Christmas. We were going to shut it before Christmas, but we thought no, for this year it'd be really good to see what the uptake is over Christmas. So the 4th of January is completely the last deadline that you can get your applications in. We then have to turn those round as fast as we can, so that we can then ask you for payment for those. So yeah, those the 4th of January, that's a hard and fast deadline, but we will turn those applications around so that you can pick them up in the February pickup slot. Yeah.
Excellent.
Good, thank you. We've got one more question on screen, who up on my screen appears as a Zoom user. I apologise, I don't know your name. And then we've got a couple in the chat.
Hello, I'm Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. I write the newsletter for Gresson Hall Museum Friends. We've got one of the tree nurseries.
Yes.
I wondered if I've got permission from Mr. Strange very kindly to be able to report this into the newsletter, because obviously we're very much involved with all the things that are happening at the museum. Is there one thing that you would like me to highlight more than anything
in your newsletter?
Yes. Apart from the Friends, it also goes into Dereham Library, so it gets circulated quite a lot, and we know it gets handed from person to person. It ends up in Scotland and Essex as well.
Yes.
So
well, what might be really useful, Heather, is for you to recycle some of the news stories that we're putting out, so that you can, reuse and re-emphasize some of those messages. And that's something that Helen Terry has been really helping us with. So I've talked for the best part of an hour, but Helen can whittle that down to 5 minutes and still get the same message across. So that's one thing that we might be able to do. Otherwise, there are so many things that you can focus on. I mean, one thing that's apparent over the summer is the impact of drought and how we can reduce the losses that we've got from drought stress. So ways that you can do that when you're planting is to remove competition, and crucially to put on mulch in planting, which will help improve the soil and help lock in soil moisture. So that's maybe a kind of a current tip, if you like. But really, I don't know, Helen, are you I get a bit no yes hello Heather, it's my colleague Helen. I was just about to ask for is I get lost with all our news releases, Helen. Are we putting out some sort of more messaging relatively soon that maybe we could pass on to Heather, so she could pick and choose the juicy bits that she likes?
Would be nice, thank you.
Yeah, I mean generally I think the right tree in the right place, and as Tom was saying, the aftercare is something we're really trying to push forward, because we want the trees to survive. And so that I would say, if there's one thing, that would be something that we're really trying to push. And I'm happy to contact you directly if we can help put out.
Would be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll find you via Pete.
Yeah.
Mr. Strange has my contact details, my email and what have you.
Yeah, I'll go looking for that tomorrow. Right, so we'll put you in touch outside. So as I said, I've got a couple of questions in the chat. So Viv from Fakenham has asked, how can we obtain low price mulch and wood chip? Is there any source for that as an adjunct to the plantings?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So you can use all sorts of organic matter for that. You can use cardboard. Don't use carpet. It's got all sorts of nasty stuff in it, underlay and things. But one of the most practical solutions is to contact local tree surgeons who are often trying to find home for their woods chip. So yes, have a look at any local tree surgeons that you've got, and they may be all too pleased to provide you with wood chip. And just on that, you can use fresh wood chip. It doesn't have to be rotted down. It is better if it is, but if it's broadleaf wood chip, then that is okay to put on trees. Don't mound it up so that you're completely burying the stem. You need to leave a little bit of space around there and go to about 1 meter, sort of diameter for each tree. But that would be the best place to go, is wood chip from tree surgeons. If it's from conifer trees, evergreen trees, then let it rot down for a good 6 months or so, and then it will work a treat.
Lovely. Right, moving on. So we've got another one from Sarah from Hindringham, who's asked, in conservation appraisals, there are areas valued for their arable open scenery. Is this taken into account when planting is done? And also, some wildlife prefers open arable. Is this taken into account, and have studies been done on benefits and losses on varied wildlife?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the complicating things. So particularly ground nesting birds like, oh, I can't forget the name. I've forgotten the name of it now. How annoying. Anyway, there are birds that are protected, and they have special designated areas, and actually increasing the hedge cover in those areas has a detrimental impact on those ground nesting birds as extra routes for predators, foxes, etc. to get in. So that is something that we do consider. One of the things that we really like to do is to encourage the restoration of landscapes. So hedges that are, you know, gappy, it's difficult to have situations where you can't restore a current hedge and for that to be an issue in the landscape. It's where new features are put in that you need to be particularly careful, and certainly for larger scale planting, as sort of Marlon was asking about earlier, there is quite a strict process to go through to make those assessments in terms of landscape character. But yeah, it's one of the things that we don't want, you know, just everywhere in Norfolk to look the same. We want to celebrate that diversity, and you're right, we do need some of those open spaces. So yeah, that's a bit of a waffly answer, but really restoring features that you got is a good way to be sensitive with the landscape and without doing too much thinking. I hope
Good.
that answers that one.
Sarah looks happy. Good. Anybody else got any questions? Put your hand up either virtually, or you can wave your hand at the screen. Right. I don't see anybody bursting to ask you any further questions. I don't know, Helen or Tom, indeed, whether you've got anything else you'd like to add to what's been said, or places
Just
you'd
one
like to
more
direct
thing.
people to. Yes, Helen.
Yeah, so Tom said the map, it's not hot off the press, but actually, Tom, I didn't tell you it is hot off the press. It was made live this afternoon, so
Okay.
sorry, I forgot to tell you that.
It's
all
so
right.
hot off the press that Tom wasn't even aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not aware of most things. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing is that
Mhm.
I've only been at the council a year, but if it gives any reassurance to people on the call, I've been amazed by how much knowledge there is by people like Tom who really know their stuff, and everything really is done properly, and it was absolutely wonderful to sort of join that team and I could talk to Tom all day. He teaches me so much about the ins and outs of tree planting and biodiversity, so you know, there really is a great team at the council doing this work, so if that offers the parish councils any reassurance.
Okay, we have got just one further question. Sarah has asked whether if you use wood chip that you've sourced from a local tree surgeon, how can you be sure that you're not spreading disease? You know, the example she gives is honey fungus.
Yeah, no, so that's a really great question, and is something that we need to do a bit more work on in terms of the messaging with that. So honey fungus gets destroyed. It doesn't like being chopped up into little bits. So the wood chip is really unlikely to spread that. But as a general principle, if you have got a disease in a tree, then it's sort of common sense not to sort of spread that around. There will be some diseases that come along where that is a problem, and in general there will be notifications on that, and there will be guidance on what particular diseases shouldn't be sort of or can be spread by wood chip movement. So things like ash dieback is absolutely fine with wood chip, as there's no risk at all with the wood chip being moved around, for example.
Okay, I mean, I suppose to follow up on that, I mean, to what extent do you think you can trust your local tree surgeons to to be absolutely open and upfront with you if they've been cutting down something that might be problematic?
Well, I mean, it is hard to say. It's a really great question, and I'm not 100% certain of the answer, if I'm perfectly honest. It is something that I need to get a bit more clarity on. But the flip side with that is diseases take hold in trees that are under stress in poor conditions. So adding organic matter, wood chip, does support one of those sort of sides of the disease sort of cycle by providing a healthy, you know, area for tree growth. So yeah, I'm clearly struggling a little bit with this one because it is something that's I've thought about. So I will go to some of the plant, you know, pathologists that I know, and we'll ask them for a bit more clarity on that.
I think it's something we'd like to
Yeah.
have.
No, absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
Sarah again from Hindringly, you've got your hand up.
Yes, sorry, very quickly. I noticed on one of your charts, Hindringham and Binham, where I'm clerk for both parishes, are high on the parishes that have a high, tree planting. I just wondered, I'm being nosy now, wondering whether that was county council land or was it private land, or, you know, just tell me. I'm being nosy and
No. Well, that's part of the point of this map, is that it's not to be nosy, but it's to kind of like, you know, sort of think, oh, you know, why is that gone so well? Where's that, you know, and to sort of almost have an element of competition. At the minute, we're dealing with relatively small numbers. You know, we're only up to sort of 75,000 or so, I think was the last count. So there are parishes that have delivered what looks like quite a large amount of planting, but actually it's just one or two schemes that are, you know, a fairly chunky size. I don't actually know off the top of my head. You know, there's those 75,000 trees have come from quite a large number of different schemes. You know, it's an amalgamation of loads of small bits of planting.
We can't tell you where exactly. Sorry,
unless
I was just
it will break
intrigued
it down.
Yeah,
it will break it down by whether it's our land or whether it's community planting. Or so if you click, you can click on the parish and it will tell you what the breakdown of it'll tell you how many trees, and also what type, whether it's on our land or community land or with a partnership. So it might be Norfolk Wildlife Trust, for example, have planted trees in an area there, but I can't tell you right now. But if you go into the map, which you can do now because it's live, you can go and have a look. I can't tell you the exact details because we've got the whole of Norfolk, so I can't.
No, that's fine. I just was intrigued to see those two. And I thought, oh, I didn't know about those. And we're also planning at Hindringham and Milwaukee Forest and having consultation on Saturday for an environmental project that we hope to carry out. So that's with the help of North Norfolk District Council, we hope.
Yes, that's brilliant. Yeah.
Lovely. We've got another question on the chat, which is something we were actually discussing, I think, before we opened up the meeting, which is it's from Sally and Burnham Norton, and she's asking, are there any plans to plant, for example, willows and alders on marshland and riparian sites? So that's become, you know, it's land that's quite wet and quite watery. And she's saying, it strikes me that the landscape around us once had many more of these trees than there are today, looking at old photos and the early maps. And it'd be great to plant new trees using cuttings from the old ones to preserve the local germplasm.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of points on that. Our riparian areas, there are some other really valuable habitats along there. So sort of wet marshland, etc. So it's one that we really need to think about a bit more carefully. A lot of those riparian sites are backing onto some of the main rivers. So there is an element of permission that's needed with the Rivers Board. Might have got the terms wrong there. But there is this massive need to adapt to climate, to keep our rivers cool with that dappled shade that's so important with rivers, and it's such a brilliant habitat that's wet woodlands. So yeah, absolutely, in the right situation, you know, willow and alder are great. There is a health warning with alder. They're very susceptible to a disease, Phytophthora, and the guidance is that the Forestry Commission won't support planting that's riparian and heavily dominated by alder, because there is such a risk that that waterborne disease, that waterborne Phytophthora, will you know, will kill the alder. There's just too high a risk that they will fail. But in those riparian areas, a really great tree to plant, if you've got the space, is a native black poplar. And that's another little bit of project work I didn't get time to talk about, but we're working with the, oddly enough, the Otters Trust over on the border with Suffolk, and they're looking to try and repopulate our native black poplars into exactly those kind of settings, and they're looking at the genetics behind it. We've got all the samples from cuttings that we're growing on our community tree nursery have been sent off to Kew to get DNA analysis, so that we can be certain that they are actually our native trees. It is one of our, you know, scarcest native tree, and that can go in those settings as well. But yeah, in the right place, that can really help with climate change adaptation and slow the flow of sort of heavy downpours.
And I would add to that, I also attend meetings of the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance and a project called Reclaim the Rain. And that whole interaction between green plantings and the structural environment and holding back waters, and trying to contribute to biodiversity net gain through that is very current. So I can't point to any specific plans, but it is very much part of discussions around those types of works.
And as well as being a good thing to do in the right situation, it's those types of things that if they're current, it's the kind of thing that we might, you know, there might be funding available for, you know, because it is a hot topic at the minute. So as well as being a good thing to do, it might be the kind of thing that it's possible to chase funding for, to actually get projects off the ground.
Yeah. Right. Have we got any more questions from anybody on the call tonight? Well, I would just like to say thank you then very much to Tom and Helen for your contribution and for your presentation. It's been very interesting, and every time I host one of these things, I find something else out that I didn't realize I didn't know. And thank you very much to all of you for attending tonight and giving us your attention and asking your questions. And hopefully you equally have got something out of it. As I said, the webinar tonight will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back, or if there's somebody who hasn't managed to make it tonight, they can go and do that. The presentation will be available from our website. Hopefully I'll do that in the next day or two. One just final thing, I will be following up tonight with a satisfaction survey to ask you how you felt about how things were arranged and the speakers tonight. And so I would encourage you that when you receive those emails, if you do, please respond to it, because it helps us to both identify subjects that people are interested in and to improve the content and the speakers in the future. So thank you very much once again, and I'll allow you all to go off now and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So you're going to catch up with the footy now, Pete?
I will be trying to. I'll go and find out. Right, you need to unmute, Helen.
Shall I stop recording it?
No, well, you can do, or I will stop recording it. It's there we go.